Nitrogen is on its way to the Gulf of Mexico. The nutrients headed there now will be the same ones responsible for a large dead zone this summer. Dead zones are large areas that lack oxygen, making it difficult for aquatic life to survive there. As J.D. Gray reports, officials searching for a solution are focusing their efforts on the shores of the Wabash.
I want to tell you about Ray McCormack's farm, about his peach orchard, and when Senator Donnelly visited. That was in April. But in order to put some context to McCormack's farm, we have to start somewhere far away, in the Gulf of Mexico.
Every year in the summer, we develop what's called a hypoxic zone, or more commonly called a dead zone. This is a location where marine organisms, fish, essentially can't exist because there's no oxygen left in the water column. Hence, a dead zone.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said the 2015 area was about the size of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined.
The causes of this dead zone, why it's forming, where the nutrients are coming from, there's really no question. They're coming from here in Indiana, from Illinois, from Iowa. The Corn Belt is the #1 source of these pollutants to the Gulf.
The nutrients are the ones used in farming, nitrogen and phosphorus. Rainfall carries the nutrients off the farmland. According to Ward, the nitrogen eventually makes its way to the Wabash River and the Mississippi River, where they empty out into the Gulf of Mexico. The nutrients can lead to rapid algae growth. When the algae dies and decomposes, it takes oxygen from the water. With no oxygen, fish and other aquatic life cannot survive.
So the question is, how do you maintain your food supply and your energy supply without this environmental impact?
This has the attention of groups like the Indiana chapter of the Nature Conservancy.
The Indiana chapter of the Nature Conservancy began looking and working within the Wabash decades ago because of that biodiversity.
But conservation practices have to be implemented on the shore.
So if you have a rare plant, for example, that rare plant exists in certain populations and places, you can go out and actually look to acquire that land to make sure that that plant is going to be preserved. With aquatic species, they live in the river systems. We can't go out and acquire the water and the river itself in the same way that we would with land.
This means working with farmers whose land is near the waterways. Smith describes the work the Nature Conservancy does as connecting farmers with the resources they need to improve soil health. The 3 things Smith says farmers can do to promote soil health: plant cover crops.
The idea of cover crops is that we're planting something else on the soil after harvest. And those are using water and using nutrients rather than having them flushed out of the soil column.
Another practice is no-till farming. It limits how much the soil is disturbed. And finally, nutrient management, creating a plan for nutrient additions on crops.
And by having good soil health, the farmer is going to see a benefit in terms of their profitability, and the streams and rivers are going to see a benefit in terms of greater biodiversity and better water quality.
Farmers like this one. Ray McCormack is a farmer and conservationist. He is also on the board for the Nature Conservancy. Smith calls McCormack an example and an ambassador. McCormack owns about 4,000 acres, including wetlands and a peach orchard, along with corn and soybean fields.
You know, our soils and our land is just like our own body. Water's good. Too much water is not good.
McCormack uses all of the soil health practices Smith recommended.
We do a whole sweep of practices that help enhance the value of those nutrients on our farms, and that lends to profitability. So the more profit we can make, the less money we can spend. It's actually about growing bigger crops and bigger yields using less nutrients.
Bigger crops using fewer nutrients. But still, it can be difficult to convince farmers to change their practices.
So any added steps, be that added cost, be that added time, right, you've got to show that opportunity cost is really worth it.
During a tour of farmland, Senator Joe Donnelly visited McCormack's farm. He says he's seen a trend of farmers talking about agriculture that's mindful of the environment.
Making sure that nutrients that are put down stay in the ground, that they're not washed into rivers, because that's money going down the drain too, but at the same time, it's also making our rivers cleaner.
Donnelly is in a position to work with farmers. He serves on the committee that writes the Farm Bill. It provides funding for conservation that can be used for nutrient management. The current bill expires next year, so Donnelly and other senators are preparing for the next Farm Bill. Ward says that if we stopped using fertilizer today, we would probably still have a dead zone because of the legacy of nutrients released in the waterways. But
the only way we're going to solve this problem is by improving our management of nutrients here in the upper Midwest.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm J.D. Gray.
Nutrient runoff isn't just impacting the Gulf of Mexico, it's an issue in the Chesapeake Bay and Great Lakes.